Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m., and I'd like to welcome you to the Mock Disaster Exercise Podcast, brought to you by MHA Consulting. I'm Michael Herrera. I'm Chief Executive Officer of MHA Consulting. If there's anything that I love to do as part of business continuity management is planning mock disasters. I started doing mock disasters back when I was with Bank of America, and I found it to be a very exciting piece of my job. Plus, as a business continuity person, it gave me a chance to get back at all those people in the business that made my life miserable when we tried to write plans and strategies, and allowed me to see how well they did under the pressure, like us having to deal with situations. For many of us, this may be the only time that this is the closest we get to an actual disruption or event. Um, but I think as we will learn today, planning a mock disaster is a lot of fun. And first and foremost, I just want to say before I actually get anything, our whole job is not to make scenarios and exercise so difficult that we're trying to get people to fail. Our whole job is to train them properly and provide them a basis so that when an event occurs, they can recall what you taught them, what scenarios they went through, and what they needed to do to respond. So that's our focus. And what I did today, and I apologize because we have a lot of background noise, is everybody's muted. When we get done to the end of the presentation, could you please hold your questions till the end, and then I'll open it all up. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started. I know a number of you out there that you do work now currently with MHA, but for those of you that don't, MHA, we've been in business for 14 years now. It's been a wonderful 14 years, many great customers across this country. We focus on three key areas: business continuity, disaster recovery, and IT optimization. I will tell you, though, mock disasters are a big piece of our business. They're very key because it really allows us to validate what plans were written and the capabilities of our people. And if you take a look at many of our clients, I was thinking back, how many mock disasters have I actually done or completed or executed with the clients? And it's got to be easily over 150 mock disasters or more in these 14 years. And it's amazing because we've done all types of exercises, from the very simple paper-based exercise all the way to multiple crisis teams across the country dealing with multiple events. One of the trends we see today is really exercises are needing to become more and more complex due to the types of threats we're dealing with. Many of these events that we never thought could happen are happening. And if you're an organization that's nationwide, there is a very good chance that you're going to be dealing with two events totally unrelated to each other that you're going to have to deal with. One of our best experiences this year was Hurricane Sandy. And during one of the clients, we were on the phone with them for almost 10 days, 8 to 10 days. And not only were they dealing with outages in their area, they're in New Jersey, but their backup site that they had in Dallas also experienced complete power outage. Plus, their third-party outsourcer that does their scanning in India also had to deal with a cyclone. So, it was somewhat funny, and it gave us some time to laugh on the phone when we couldn't believe that not only we were dealing with the hurricane, we have a power outage, plus the people in India have a cyclone. So I'm telling you, that's the way the world is changing. And I strongly believe over time, your exercises have to become more complex. They have to test your people at a higher level. And it's getting to the point that basically the mock disasters have to lead into a full production exercise where you actually run from your backup site for days to really prove what you can do. Okay, what's our agenda today? Today we're going to talk about 5 key items. What's the value of holding mock disaster exercises? What are the considerations in planning an exercise? Very critical. How do I plan the exercise? What do I have to consider before I actually develop it? How do I build it? There's many different ways to build your exercise. We'll talk a little bit about that. How do I execute, facilitate, which is the most critical part of this whole piece? And last, very importantly, post-exercise reporting. There's nothing else that drives me crazy than doing a great exercise, documenting everything. We come back a year later to do another exercise, and we're dealing with the same problems. So very important, post-exercise reporting and resolution of issues is critical. So those are the 5 key things: value of holding the mock disaster, how do we design considerations for exercise, building it, executing, and then post-exercise. Okay. I really believe value of conducting mock exercises. I think all of us would agree. You play like you practice. And one of the other key quotes I always like to use is John Moat from the City of Scottsdale Emergency Management, who's outstanding when it comes to mock disasters and handling emergency management. He always says people react, or they will do what they've been trained to do. That's the key thing of conducting mock disaster exercise. You want to play like you practice, so you got to make sure people use these exercises. What is it that the value is? One, it prepares your team members to work under the stress of a real event. As your team members become more sophisticated and have a higher level of maturity, you want to make that stress level a little higher each time. So they learn to work under the stress of an event. They learn to work under a time pressure. They learn to use the process to meet deliverables. So very important. That's one of the key values of conducting a mock exercise. Also very importantly, is it allows you to make mistakes now. Here you can use this in a controlled environment to try new things, come up with new ideas, but also to make mistakes that you can make, but not in a real event. Number two, stress test team members in the roles they will play. Again, this is the trend and something we all have to consider. And many of you that have worked with me before, we see this in the exercises we do. Stress test team members in the roles they will play. Can they do the job? Can they not? Where do I see crisis team or incident management teams going? It really is coming down to not because you have the title, but can you handle the role? And currently we're working with some clients that have I think are doing a good job in actually putting the people they feel can handle the role, but it has nothing to do with their title. And I think that's something we have to do over time. Let's get the right people in the job, the right people in the bus, seats in the bus that can do this. Identify gaps and exposures. One of the key things you want to do when you design your exercise, and one of the values you should get out if it's designed properly, is you make sure by designing it properly, you're testing or exercising those key components to identify gaps and exposures. This is the time you want to do it. Design the exercise properly so that, I'm testing key components that I know have problems or have opportunities. Let's see what the gaps or exposures that come out of it. And last, validate your plan content. That's very important as well, that you're validating not only the plan content, but the process you use. You want to make sure in one of the key values too that I see in conducting mock exercises is you want to make sure the process works. Again, I always go back to my brother who's a fire chief at NASA, and I've always learned from him is that their process is generic to deal with any event. Incident command. Yes, they have specific things they get trained on, but they're trained to basically deal with any event using the incident command process, whether it's small, large, catastrophic, and they're able to be dropped in and do that. So I think it's very important. Again, preparing our team members to work under stress, stress testing them in the appropriate way, identifying gaps and exposures in the process, validating plan content, and leaving it an open forum and opportunity for people to make mistakes now. We have been at clients before where the team is terrified of making mistakes. And that is that you just do not want that when you're conducting a mock disaster. Okay. Exercise considerations. And again, as I stated first, its whole focus of an exercise is not to make people fail. I've had clients or people that have said, you know what, Michael, you need to make this exercise so hard because I really want to see what they can do, versus let's teach them the process. Let's make sure they get some experience, because when the real event occurs, that's what we want them to do, not to make it so difficult or complex they just can't recover. But what are some of the key considerations you need to have before you plan a mock disaster? Boy, first and foremost, how mature is my team? If my team is a novice or they're intermediate or advanced, I'm going to do a lot of different things, whether if they're novice versus advanced. And I'll give you some examples. If my team is novice, I'm probably going to make sure that exercise is announced. I already know who my participants are going to be. The scenario is simple in nature. It's very controlled. There's a lot of direction given by the facilitator and other team members. It's typically maybe only an hour to maybe no more than 3 hours in length. So you can see the difference now if I go to advanced. If I'm a very advanced crisis team, it's going to typically be unannounced. We're going to call people in the early morning or maybe even at night or the day before, and they're going to start acting in that role. We're going to use all of our emergency notification systems. We're just going to use whoever's available. And we're either going to call primary and alternates, whoever shows up is part of that. We may even involve our vendors. We use a very highly complex fluid scenario. We give them very limited direction. And in some cases, it's typically 4 hours, but we have some clients that will actually say, I want an 8-hour exercise, where we actually do a turnover. So you can see the dramatic difference in how do I plan my exercise, determining if I'm novice, whether I'm intermediate, or whether I'm advanced. What we highly recommend is go through it and build your capability over time. Don't try to throw the kitchen sink at them the first time. That's very important. So assess where your team is at and build your capability over time. What are my objectives? What am I trying to achieve? Is it I want to validate that I know I can assemble the team, they can get here, and they know how to fill out forms, as well as hold briefings? Get a clear understanding. What is it you want to build over time and make those your objectives? Too many times objectives are not made clear, so you really don't know what you're trying to exercise and or build capability. So very important, define what those are. And if your team is novice, start with very simple objectives. I will tell you, just getting your team to know where are my command centers, or where's the conference bridge for the virtual command center, where is my plan, who's on the team. In a lot of cases, those sound really simple, but let me tell you, you got to build from somewhere. So very important, again, build your objectives based on the maturity of your team, and then over time, those objectives become more complex and they become harder to achieve. If you need to do team training, do team training. Again, we're not here to make this team fail. So it doesn't hurt to always be able to do team training and to make people prepared well enough ahead of time so that they succeed. Because when the real event happens, that's what you want. So whole team training, if it's an hour, half an hour refresher before people get there, before they actually do the exercise. And, typically don't hold it more than a week in advance so people don't forget, okay? Identify what parts of the plan do I want to exercise, or parts of your process. So as part of your objective, say, here's the parts this exercise is going to focus on exercising, and making sure that then those are part of the scenario and things that you want to bring out, either good or bad. There's times you want to show how good corporate communications is. So you know what? We're going to make sure they've got to do 3 media releases, plus they have to do an actual briefing. So build it into time. And again, I always like to do, like those of you that work with us, we already know we always have a roadmap for your business continuity program. Do the same thing. You can do the same thing with your mock disasters or your crisis team. What is my roadmap over time, so that, in 2 years, they basically know what to do and they can do it without me. One of the last things, though, I think that I would want to say, exercise, make sure if you're the business continuity coordinator, you play a very key role. Just don't sit back. I see that happen a lot of time. You're a very key advisor, so make sure you're part of that exercise. You provide them with, you have such key information at your disposal. All right, the last one is, what type of exercise? Is it a desktop? Is this a fully functional exercise do I want to hold? All goes back again to what are my objectives and how mature my team is. If this is your first one and you actually have command centers, you may not want to say, hey, I want you guys to set up the command center without me and get everything going. So over time, say, gosh, I want to make this just a very simple paper-based exercise, make it relaxed, not a lot of time frames or time limits. But over time, yes, you know what? We're going to make this a fully functional. You're going to come in, set up the command center on your own with limited direction. So again, this all goes in your considerations. But again, base it all off how mature my team is and how ready they are. All right. How much time do I have to hold? Again, additional considerations. The trend is now I'm getting asked more and more to compress the exercise time frame. We used to get 4 hours. Many now are saying, you know what, Michael, not only do you have to do training in that 4 hours, but you know what, you're going to also have to do the exercise. So basically limiting us to, the 2 to 3 hour exercise. So we're getting the time frame compressed more and more. And now we have to really consider, what is it we're trying to achieve in the exercise, compressing it in that time frame. Also, and I think this is great, more and more clients are wanting to say, you know what, let's not produce as many updates or what we call injects, which I will discuss in the next couple slides, but let's give the team more time to think. Don't put such a time limit. Let's make sure they understand how to produce specific deliverables, whether that's communications, whether that's our incident action plan. Give them more time and let them work through it versus compressing that. So we may not have as many updates, or as we call injects, to the scenario. We may have less because we're more focused on, can they learn the process and can they understand what they need to do. What scenario do I want to use? I guess one of the best things I was taught by an emergency planner here in Phoenix was, in many cases, the scenario doesn't matter. It's the impacts that we're worried about and what do they do. So I think sometimes clients or people we work with are so concerned about the scenario that it makes everything so complex, where it's really the impact of the event that we're dealing with and how do we respond and resume and recover our business. But use relevant scenarios and make sure they're relevant to your specific facility, your region. And in a lot of cases, you don't have to cause catastrophic damage to test your team appropriately. One of the great ones we've been using lately that's worked well for a number of our clients has been Legionnaire's disease. Building's fully functional, standing, but guess what? I can't work there. So think through your scenario, look back at your maturity, make sure it's relevant, but be more concerned about what are the impacts from that scenario and how would my team adjust to those impacts. Because you really want your team over time, even though a number of you may be in hurricane zones, earthquake zones, etc., you really want them to be as there's a gentleman that we work with that his term is event neutral all the time. He'll say our team needs to be event neutral. It's kind of what you want your team to be. You want to be able to bring them into whatever the event was, and they're good enough with the process to be event neutral, so the scenario really doesn't matter. Who will provide expert input? In any good exercise, you're going to need to have some subject matter experts. So what we like to do is once we identify the scenario and we've worked this, or we even bring them ahead of time, we say, gosh, we need somebody from facilities, somebody from IT, maybe somebody from HR, depending on the scenario and the impacts, and we bring them in to help us design the exercise. So it's always great. You get these subject matter experts. They help you with a scenario. They give you the realistic viewpoint and what would really happen, and you use them to help design it and build it. And in many cases, then we take those individuals out of the exercise. So they cannot participate, but they've already provided their input, and they're there to see, hey, yes, the team responded appropriately, or did not. Okay? And one of the things here, before I forget, make sure over time that you use all your team members. Too many times, every time I go to the exercise, there's the A team, all smiles and ready to go. I would rather see, give me primary and backups together, and let's see how we do. Because that's what is a real reality is going to be in an event. You're going to get whoever is there, and it may be your top performers, and they may not be your top performers. And also, when you test your crisis management team leaders, rotate them in and out. The crisis team leader is just like a coach. It's like the general, and the personality of your team changes based on who is leading the team. So very important that you get your crisis team adjusted to working with the different team leaders, whoever they may be, based on the incident and the type of scenario or event they're dealing with. They have to deal with the personalities. Because when you're a crisis team leader, I'll tell you, your entire personal and background history all comes into play when you're leading a team. If you have a military background, you might lead a little different if you're more of a facilitator in your management style. So you need to make sure your team is prepared to deal with the different personalities and capabilities of your team leaders. And then how will I measure success and identify opportunities? Based on your objectives and what you said, here's what I want to get through in this exercise. That's how you're going to measure opportunities. And make it very simple. This is a specific area I wanted to see if I succeeded. Make it pass or fail, or make it red, green, or yellow. Keep it really simple. Years ago, I made the mistake in trying to provide some metrics in mock disasters where we actually came up with a score out of 100, 0 to 100. So we'd measure all these areas and then give the client a score in that exercise. That caused more problems than I'll ever know. A team scored 94% one year, and then the next year went down to 92, and you get asked, where's the difference? Keep it simple. Like I said, pass, fail, or red, green, yellow. That way then, as you do and always have a consistent reporting approach, which we'll talk about. So again, back to what we said, how much time do I have to hold? Typically, most exercises are 4 hours. What do we see as the trend? It's being compressed. But again, also remember, in today's world, you lose people. So take that into account in the culture, all right? What scenario do I use? Make sure it's relevant, but don't get so hung up in the overall scenario, because we're more concerned about the impacts of this scenario and how do we respond. Use good subject matter experts. They're in your company, and man, it's great when they come in and they help you so you don't design it all on your own, and you get all the key components you need to make your exercise or your scenario worthwhile. And then based on your objectives, those are kind of your key metrics you want to start to use to identify, did I do well, did I not? Okay. Pardon me. There we go. Planning the exercise. So in our previous, we kind of identified the scenario, whether it was Legionnaire's disease, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's workplace violence, which is one of the exercises people are really having us use today. So many different types of scenarios. But once you identify the scenario, as I talked earlier, gather your subject matter experts to help you build a scenario. And as you build your scenario, remember, all it is a story. You're telling the story from the time the event occurred to the time it ended. So you have to put together this nice story. So how do I usually like to do it is get on the whiteboard, I write the name of the scenario, and we start planning. We just go and we just brainstorm. Here's what happened first, second, third. Here's when it ended. And we just come up with the storyline. Here's what we want to say happened along the way. It doesn't have to be perfect. By using your subject matter experts, you work across the timeline of your story, of your scenario, and that's how you build it. There's some great, now that I've seen working with a number of the clients, it's great to see them as they really become part of the storytellers, and they're now becoming key in helping us design the scenario because they now understand the process. And if you follow this way every time, one, you design really good scenarios, and two, by using the subject matter experts, they become more complex, and again, you get to achieve more. Now, develop injects. So injects are really, as we call them, they're updates to the scenario, or they're like chapters in your book. So you tell them, here's the baseline. Guess what? We've had an explosion at this building caused by a unknown origin. So that's the baseline. The first inject or update could be, we now know people have evacuated the building. We have injuries. The building is currently without power, etc. And then you begin to tell additional injects. Now, how many injects typically in a 4-hour scenario or updates? Typically, right now we're doing is 4 to 5 injects. From the time we give them the baseline, we do an additional 4 to 5 updates. With the compressed timeframes, those are now getting a smaller number. So typically, we may only have 3 to 4 injects or updates. So you need to develop your timeline. So if you have 4 hours, you say, okay, here's when the first scenario or these occurred. This is what I'm going to tell them. And then as each scenario inject is provided, then you say, I'm going to do this in the next 20 minutes, the next 30. That's how you tell your whole story. Very important. So always make sure you have a good timeline for the scenario and the injects. Now, as you become better and better at facilitating, you may not always follow the timeline. And I know a lot of times some of my staff gets a little irritated with me as they, I'll have somebody I can see somebody in the back saying, you're 10 minutes behind. Well, let the people, as you do your timeline, as you get good at this, if they're doing well on an inject, let them go a little over time. If they finish the inject and accomplish all the deliverables early, move on. You will end up completing in the right amount of time. So don't get so hung up. The timeline is only a guideline or reference. Okay, deliverables for each inject. So as I give people the storyline and I tell them, you've had an explosion. The next one is, I know I got people out of the building. This is all we know. I may say, okay, here's the 3 things I need you to achieve for me based on what you know now, such as, how will I make sure I account for everybody? What are the critical processes at this building? Who was on the crisis team? I'll give them very simple deliverables. As the storyline continues, they get deliverables for each of those updates or injects as well. Don't make the deliverable list exhaustive, because you may only say you have 30 minutes to review this and provide me with the answers. So remember, take that into consideration. The sheer number is not what's important of deliverables you give them on each inject or update. It's more what specifically, so that you can meet your objectives of the exercise. As teams have a heightened level of maturity, we give them less and less deliverables. We know what they should be, but guess what? We give them less because we already know they know what they should be. So again, that's kind of how, when teams first start, we make it very clear what we're looking for. As teams mature, we give them less because they should know and follow their plan, and we already have adjusted for that and are prepared to assess them properly. Okay. Management review and approval. There are times, and we've encountered this, we come up with a great scenario. Get the subject matter experts together. We design the timeline. It looks great. We're going to get an Academy Award for this scenario. And then we take it to management, and they're like, what were you people thinking? Can't use this. It's not appropriate for the entity. It wouldn't look good if we use this. It's too culturally insensitive. We may, especially workplace violence, and it'd be insensitive to the culture of our organization. So as much as you don't want to do this, I would always make sure whoever your sponsor is, whoever your key executive is, I would have them review it and approve it. Very important. Now, I noted down at the bottom, there's an asterisk here that says FEMA exercise planning guidelines. FEMA has a very thorough approach to planning exercises. There's a couple of our clients, because of their utility, financial background, that they really do need a very defined process so that when either they get audited or reviewed, they can clearly see that there was a defined process. I like to use a FEMA exercise planning guidelines because you know what? It makes sure I don't forget anything. Some of you may like it, some of you not. Some of our clients don't want us to use it because it just adds additional work to the process. Others use it. So there's a great planning exercise guidelines out on the internet from FEMA. And again, it's very comprehensive. So if you wanted to use those, you can. On complex exercises or those where I need to do it, I love it because it gives us the step-by-step on how to do it. Okay. Very important when it comes to exercise logistics. This will sync your exercise faster than anything else. If you don't have the right logistics in place, I have seen well-designed exercises go down the tubes. Make sure, you know what, if I have to use my conference bridge lines, they better be working. And I'll tell you, everybody says, oh, no problem. Well, how many conference bridge lines have I gone to exercises where it's been disconnected? Or guess what? It logs us off after a certain amount of time. Or it won't handle all the people we have. Or people don't know the numbers. We had this on one exercise we did, which was a highly complex, unannounced, where the client themselves relocated for the entire day and did production work. In the email that was sent out with the conference bridge line, it was off by 1 digit. We must have heard 200 times that day that we were off 1 digit. Please make sure everything works good on your conference lines. Make sure, especially in today's world, conference bridge lines are really now for exercises. That's what a lot of people are just doing. It's all virtual. Make sure your emergency notification systems, if you're using them, are properly set up. It will notify who you need to do, and it's ready to go. This is another thing. If those two things don't notify people, you don't notify people properly or timely or with the right message, it's going to disrupt and take away from how well you wrote the exercise and what it's trying to achieve. Directions and security access. If people don't know where to go and they can't get in, you're going to hear about it. And so please make sure people know where they're going, and tell them again and tell them one more time. Make sure they know where they're going and everything that they can get into the building, wherever you're holding the exercise, they can do it. Because again, you're going to hear about that. It's going to detract from your exercise. Food, water. Please don't be cheap. Feed your people. 2 to 4 hours. There's been extra times where, you know what, the client didn't do it. MHA just said, we're going to make sure people eat. As you know, that takes a lot of heat off too. If somebody's in there for 4 hours, give them a coffee, a donut, anything. That really helps. So make sure they're there and they're fed properly during this exercise. Room setup is very important. You don't want it in a classroom style if you have your team set up. You want them to be able to work together. You want them to facilitate communication as well as be able to make it easier for the crisis team leader to walk around, figure out what's happening. Your room setup is key. So spend the time. We have a couple clients on the phone now I know that are outstanding when it comes to exercise logistics. They're great at making sure everything's working, that people know where they're going, they have food, the room is set up, it's labeled. The time and money and the effort you spend on logistics will save you and make you look really good. Because if you don't, and even though you may have a great scenario, you're in trouble. And then last, make sure everything is documented. People have their documents in front of them. They know what they need to do. Make sure everything gets printed properly. Because again, if you have things out of order or if things haven't been printed, forgotten, you do not want to do that at the last minute. And lastly, because this has happened to me multiple times, we've sent the scenario out, and as you do updates or injects, those are all printed separately and you hand them out so that they don't have the entire exercise together. Well, it's happened multiple times where people have actually gotten the whole exercise ahead of time. So then you have to rely on their honesty not to look ahead. So can't overemphasize exercise logistics. Okay, here's the key part of this whole thing. If you're not a good facilitator, as they say, if you can't stand the heat in the kitchen, get out. Highly recommend it. If you're not a good facilitator, have somebody who is, because you need somebody who has positive energy, who knows how to lead a room, who knows based on the scenario, is the team making good progress? How do I keep them on time? Do I let them talk? Do I know when to provide input to what they're attempting to achieve? Get a good facilitator. Or if you're a good one, then fine. But if you're not, make sure you have somebody that can lead that room and get people through the exercise. Otherwise, it can be boring. It can be misleading. You will not achieve your objectives. I can't stress that enough. You need a good facilitator to handle the exercise. When I'm facilitating exercise, I will guide them. I don't give them the answers. That's important. You help get them to where they're going. Because remember, this is the learning process. So you want them to learn and help them themselves get to where they need to be. I've always said, if you give me good, smart people that know the business in a room, we'll fix it. We may not get there in the time frame that everybody wants. It may not be a wonderfully, perfect incident management process, but we will get there. Bullet number 4, and when you're facilitating, we tell people this all the time. Don't let participants change your scenario. Your scenario may not be perfect. There may be a hole or two you don't know and that people catch you on. But I always tell them up front, thank you for your input, but you cannot change my scenario. And that helps a lot. Let's just work with it and let's get to the end. That's what we're trying to do. Encourage communication. It's quite funny, if you look at the humans, all of us human beings, I can put people right next to each other, tables, or I can put them in rooms right next to each other, and you'll tell them, please go talk to the other teams about the incident, what you need, what information, and they won't talk to each other, and they're right next to each other. So encourage that communication. Mandate they communicate. However you need to do, so make sure your team learns how to communicate, not just in this scenario, but in a real event. Make sure you give enough time to, as the facilitator, allow time to discuss what went well, opportunities, and that may even be during the exercise. It may not even be when you get to the end. People may want to say, hey, this is great, or you know what, we have big problems here. Allow that and work within your time frame that you've been given for the exercise. Okay, well, we're going to get done early. Hopefully we'll have some good questions here. Post-exercise reporting. Always, always document results of the exercise. Have a standardized report you use. Because many of you, if you're at all ever going to get audited, you should have your scenario planning document. So this is how I plan the exercise, who's participating, what's happening, my timeline. Then you should have the actual scenario itself. Here's the scenario, the injects or the updates. And last is my post-exercise report. So you should have basically 3 documents with every exercise you do. Make sure they get documented during the exercise. You should have good flip charts up. You should have somebody, of course, as part of your incident management team documenting the action items. Plus, also, when you finish, you want to go back over what went well, what didn't. Do a post-incident review. Identify your action items. Boy, how many times, if I could think of the thousands and thousands of action items, and I really wonder what percentage ever got resolved. There's some folks we work with that are just outstanding at getting these resolved, and they're on top of these people, and they make sure you assign responsibility for action items. Now, some may be so big or onerous you may not get to, but make sure you know who's assigned the responsibility, especially for the easy ones that we can take care of quickly. We like to try to resolve within 60 days. If you can get them done sooner, please. But don't try to go back to the next exercise you do with the same action items. And I see that over and over, and I don't get it. If there's ones you can't resolve, let your senior management know and say, this is going to be outstanding till the next exercise, but resolve them. Review your exercise report with management and the team. If you can hold within 2 weeks, say, hey, I want to get everybody back together. Here's the results. Here's what we found. It's great because it hasn't been forgotten. People, it's still somewhat fresh in their mind. Get them back together and say, how did it go? Here's the results. Here's how we did. And it helps people stay in that flow. And then last and most importantly, based on the results of the exercise and the action items, I'm sure you're going to have to update your plans, whether those are the incident management team plans, whether those are business recovery plans, IT disaster recovery plans. So very, very critical in this post-exercise reporting. So remember, you should have basically 3 documents. My planning document that says, here's how I came up about the scenario, who helped me, how we built it, my actual scenario itself in the index, and last, my post-exercise report. All right, I'm going to open it up here, and I hope we have some questions. I'm going to unmute everybody. So what questions do we have out there from the group?
Hi, Michael. This is Debbie Miller from Banner Health.
Hey, Debbie.
This is very good. I wish I would have seen this before I actually did my last tabletop exercise. I do have a question. I always have to reach far to think of a catastrophic enough event which would cause us to fail over to our secondary data center. And I typically get a lot of pushback on my event being rather unrealistic, and before we even can get started, I have to sort of defend my event. Do you ever just put it right out there, like, you know, let's not challenge the event, let's just take it for what it is and move forward?
Yes, and that's kind of what I said. I always tell people, don't change my scenario. And I think once they know that, because otherwise you will always have those detractors. And that's why, too, when you get the subject matter experts involved early, guess what? It lends a lot of credibility to your scenario. So, yes, let them know up front. Do not change my scenario, whether you agree with it or not. This is what we're using, and what I want to see is how you respond, resume, and recover the business. Good question.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Who else has a question? There's got to be some other questions out there. Okay, everybody. If there's not any additional questions, feel free, as always, to contact me, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. And again, thank you so much for being here today. Hopefully, this was productive for all of you. And again, we look forward to having you on our next podcast. Everybody, have a great day, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.